Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on X at Movies TV Mad and on Instagram and on Threads at Movies TV Mad X. A very warm welcome to Friday's edition of the Movies TV Mad Daily. Now, it's all on record. During the development of the first Wonder Woman film, Zack Snyder had another idea. Being Zack Snyder, it was very out there, it was very unique, and it was very interesting, and it was called Wonder Woman 1854. While promoting Rebel Moon 2, he went into this with Empire again, and we're going to give it a read because I think it's a very, very interesting subject, and I don't need an excuse to really start talking about the old DCEU days because I loved them. I loved Man of Steel. I loved Batman vs Superman, Dawn of Justice. I even like that weird music video edited Suicide Squad movie, Zack Snyder's Justice League, Black Adam, the first Aquaman. They were all some of the greatest CBMs I've ever seen. Now, you know that I've got pinned my favourite. I've ranked all my favourite DCEU movies here on my YouTube. You can check that out. So, the DCEU is probably one of my favourite subjects to talk about because it was an amazing time. It was an insane time. We fought to release the Snyder Cut. It was fucking mad. So let's get into this. Zack Snyder explained scrapped Wonder Woman 84 story. We talked about it so much. Exclusive. By Ben Travis. Throughout the course of the DCEU, we saw Wonder Woman in a variety of environments in her native home of Themyscira, with the Amazons fighting through the battlefields of World War I, with Steve Trevor living in the 1980s, living in the 1980s USA. In Wonder Woman 84, boring, move on, and battling alongside Batman and Superman better in the present day in Justice League, but once upon a time, there was an idea to present a different kind of early Wonder Woman story, one that would have seen her fighting in the Crimean War in the 1800s. All that came of the possible project, dubbed Wonder Woman 1854, was an image that Snyder shared on social media with Gal Gadot's Diana's princess surrounded by soldiers and holding three severed heads. Yeah, I remember this, but this is so Zack Snyder. He's so out there. And a huge studio like Warner Brothers, I mean, they would have said, I know what they said. They would have went, no, Zack, this is insane. I don't think they're toxic or wrong or bad for thinking that, but still, I would have loved to have seen it. In Empire's major new interview with Snyder, in the Acolyte issue, let's not talk about the Acolyte. We posed him your reader questions, and among them came up the topic of Wonder Woman 1854 and what it might have been. Allow Snyder himself to explain. The idea of that was an early riff. We were doing a once Wonder Woman left the island in search of Ares. What happened to her in her different incarnations? He states, my idea for it was that she would travel around the world looking for Ares and she would go to every place where there was conflict. The resulting story would have been a combination of love and war. On those battlefields, she found those lovers, warriors, and they would age out because she is immortal. He elaborates, they would be her lover for 10 years, or they might die in battle, and it was probably sad for a lot of the guys because they would see her starting to be nice to the next young soldier and be like, oh, I'm being replaced. But all the guys that she had with her were those loyal warriors she found on the battlefields all over the world. Ultimately, the story would have led Diana to Chris Pine, Steve Trevor. We talked about it. Steve Trevor was there in the Crimea, Snyder confirms. Instead, Wonder Woman's journey through the Snyderverse took another path, but that one shot from Stephen Berkman remained. It was never a screenplay, but we talked about it so much that it kind of had its own life. There you have it. Wonder no more. So that is very, very interesting to me. And you know what? I think this would have been very, very interesting. Listen, you can't have Wonder Woman holding severed heads in a mainstream comic book movie, superhero movie. It ain't gonna work, right? People are gonna say, what the fuck is this, right? We all know how marketing works, and we know, you know how you appeal to the general audience, how you don't. We spoke briefly yesterday about, the Kingdom Come S-Shield. I think it's a very underwhelming piece of marketing for normies. But anyway, how could have Snyder done this? Could it have worked? I think it's a very interesting story to have her, begin from the Crimean War. I mean, because she's immortal, she's been around for so long. I'm not so sure about, having lovers and then getting other lovers when the others die. I'm not sure about that. I think, maybe people wouldn't have liked that. I'm not too sure. But when you're developing ideas, you go through different ideas. Some ideas are kept and some ideas are scrapped. It's a bit like Bruce Wayne and Lois Lane, in the Justice League sequels. A lot of people wouldn't have liked that. But it was an idea. You talk about it, you say, ship is sailed, and you move on. You've got to have ideas to get to the idea. That's how you create stories. You don't just pen a story. You go through a multitude of ideas. That's how telling stories actually works. Now, for me, if I was working with Zack and he was a working partner of mine, and he really was holding on to this idea, I'd be saying, well, how about this, Zack? How about if she's a bit like Connor McLeod or Duncan McLeod, the Highlander, when they have flashbacks? She could have flashed back to things during the movie. So you could have done exactly what they did in the first Wonder Woman movie. It can take shape the way it does, but she can have flashbacks to the Crimean War and other historical battles with her looking for Ares. That could have been very, very interesting. So personally, I'm not, I'm not actually opposed to this idea. I love this idea from the minute I heard it, and it would have been very, very interesting. But, a mainstream, a huge studio like Warner Brothers are not going to go with this idea. But when you bring in someone like Snyder, it's what you're going to get. It's not like Warner Brothers decided that Zack Snyder should make their DC movies. That was Nolan's decision. And Warner Brothers were like, Nolan's amazing. He did the Dark Knight trilogy, will do whatever he wants to do. Interestingly, Jonathan Nolan, Nolan's brother, was not involved in the DCEU. And I'm wondering if he was involved in the DCEU, maybe it could have had a better chance of succeeding. Because he was involved with the Dark Knight trilogy. So I'm just wondering, and I think he may even be the smarter of the two brothers. Believe it or not, you're thinking, but Mick, Chris Nolan's a great director, right? Great writer-director. He is. But Jonathan Nolan is a very talented guy too. And I think that Nolan may be more of a director than a writer, if you ask me. I think that Snyder is more of a director than a writer, in my humble opinion. And maybe Jonathan Nolan was the thing that was lacking from the DCEU to, I suppose, enable some intellect into those stories. We'll never know. As I said on the top of the show, I love the DCEU. But this fundamentally was a very, very interesting idea. You could have even had Wonder Woman 1854 as the sequel, right? We've had this story. You take like an interval, you don't continue it, and you just do Wonder Woman 1854. The problem is, she's looking for Ares, so you can't really, I suppose, come on, bonehead. You can't do that, can you, Mick? Because she's already found him. I get it. So really, it's either Wonder Woman 2017 or Wonder Woman 1854. So it's an idea. Would it have been as successful as what we got in the end? Now, it's interesting because Zack Snyder didn't choose Patty Jenkins to direct Wonder Woman. Jeff Johns did. That's why they were like that. That's why they did Wonder Woman 84 together. So I think the only way Wonder Woman 1854 actually gets made is if Snyder directs the movie and he brings in his writing partner, Alan Heinberg, who wrote the movie, the first movie, the movie we saw, the first Wonder Woman movie with Zack. I think maybe you could have done that. It's interesting because Zack Snyder, according to that, really liked this idea, and Snyder was very much involved in this movie. All the choreography, all the action for that first Wonder Woman movie was done by Zack Snyder, right? Patty Jenkins has no clue how to direct action. And a lot of the female directors, and I'm not being sexist here, but a lot of the female directors that they choose for comic book movies don't know how to direct, action. Is it Kathy Yan, who did Birds of Prey, didn't know how to direct action? They had to get the John Wick guy to try and save the action set pieces that she fucked up. I'm not saying that women can't direct action. I'm saying the women they choose can't direct action. And it's interesting because they're an insular industry. They only choose from the people around the industry. They don't go from outside. They don't go to film schools. They don't say, this is the problem. And for me, if I was running a Hollywood studio, let's imagine I was running a Hollywood studio, I would have, an acting school academy. I would have a film school academy attached to my studio. So you would have a conveyor belt of talent. In other words, you would have new talent coming through exclusively for your studio. Because right now, all entertainment do is use the same actors, the same writers, the same directors, the same producers. It's the same people making the same shit. That's why it all looks so made, it all looks the same, and it doesn't really work. But it's basically like running a football club. You have your youth academies, and then when your players retire, you bring new players through. They still buy players in as well. As I say, the problem with Hollywood, the problem with the entertainment industry in general, it's just the same people. They've got to have the DNA. They've got to have the connections. They've got to be known by the big people. So there's no new talent going through, especially in Hollywood. It's the same people again and again and again. And it simply doesn't work. You look at, for example, Disney Star Wars and Disney Marvel. It's the same people. It's the latest activists making, a Disney Plus Star Wars streaming show with not much experience. But that doesn't matter. I'm happy for people with no experience if they have a vision and they have, an idea of telling a great adventure story in terms of Star Wars or Marvel. But they don't want to do that. It's all about their propaganda and extremism. And this is where we are today. And we're going around in circles constantly. But this Wonder Woman 84 idea does sound very, very interesting to me. Unfortunately, they had no trust in Snyder at this point. They wanted to make money. Because this is why they own DC. This is why Disney own Marvel. They want to make money. When you make comic book movies, it's not about making a good film. It's about making a film that makes money. Money is the name of the game. But call me simplistic if you like. If you make a great movie with a great story and with great performances, you will automatically make money. And this is also the problem with New Hollywood. They're so busy listening to social media and what every opinion is. They're so busy listening to activists. In the end, they're not listening to great ideas. They're not bringing in passionate, talented filmmakers, right? And that's the problem. Every time I hear a name, they're recruiting the Marvel's director to make a film. I forgot what film it's going to be, but it's ridiculous. It's insane. I think it's the sequel to 28 Days Later or whatever it is. It's insane. She's just directed a fucking flop. and you're bringing her in to make, a big sequel. It doesn't make sense. Surely it's time for Hollywood to start plucking talent from outside its system. But they won't. They talk about diversity. There's no real fucking diversity, is there? How can there be diversity when you're just casting actors and appointing directors within your system? Doesn't matter that they're black or they're Asian or they're Latino or Latinx, right? Doesn't matter. That's not diversity when you're only choosing minorities from within your own system. Minorities that still happen, conveniently to have Hollywood DNA. That's not real diversity. You want diverse talent. They're not picking diverse talent. They're picking people who look diverse but are not talented. And there lies the problem. The motivations have changed, and this is why Hollywood is dead right now. I've become very obsessed with the 1930s Hollywood because the other day I picked up The Wizard of Oz from my Blu-ray collection. I may have mentioned that in a few videos ago, or the last video, and I'm really obsessed with The Wizard of Oz right now. Now we talk about, and I've said this before as well, we talk about like gal bosses. Well, in the 1930s, we had two of the biggest movies were starring women. One was Vivien Leigh in Gone with the Wind, and the other was Judy Garland in The Wizard of Oz, two of the greatest movies ever fucking made. And you had so many, in the 30s, you had so many big movies starring women and men equally. But that's the difference, isn't it? They were talented women. The girl bosses we're getting today, Millie Bobby Brown, are not talented women. That's the difference. That's why everyone laughs at girl boss movies. I've probably mentioned this on videos as well. It's my belief that if Millie Bobby Brown turned up to 1930s Hollywood, she'd be laughed out of fucking Tinseltown. There isn't talent. This is not a great era in entertainment. And at the very least, Zack Snyder was thinking outside the box with things like Wonder Woman 1854. And who knows if it would have made a good movie? Who knows if it would have made as much money as the movie Patty Jenkins directed. But don't forget, it's also the movie that Zack Snyder shot most of the action for and choreographed as well and co-wrote the story as well. Zack Snyder had a lot to do with that success. But who knows if Wonder Woman 1854 was a viable idea. I can't tell you that. It sounds like an interesting idea, but using severed heads as a promotion was never ever going to work. You can't do that, and Snyder fans will be coming in at me and saying, and I'm a Snyder fan as well, by the way, I love the guy, but I think severed heads is where you have to draw the line. You can't have that. And I'm not saying he would have been dumb enough to have, the marketing picture, the marketing campaign of Wonder Woman holding severed heads. It's simply not going to work. It's a non-starter. Now, obviously, the story is that she's looking for Ares. She's going through these different places in history looking for Ares, and she eventually does meet Steve Trevor. It's interesting. I don't know how it would have worked, but it's certainly an interesting idea. And Snyder certainly has a lot of out there interesting ideas. And I think Hollywood needs more people with experimental, risque ideas. And this is the problem. I was talking about Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis the other day, which is being deemed as too experimental. Back in the day, Hollywood was experimental. Going back to Wizard of Oz, movies in the 30s weren't typical of the Wizard of Oz. That movie cost $2 to $3 million to make at the time. The guy who spent that money nearly got fired by MGM. It was one of those risky movies, and they did it. I mean, a lot of people got hurt making that damn movie, but it became a magical, amazing movie full of possibilities. That's what taking risks and making experimental movies is all about. Wonder Woman 1854 would have been a very experimental movie, But that's what we need in Hollywood. That's what we need in entertainment. They're not willing to make experimental projects, either on streaming, television, or in film. Do you not think that 24 wasn't an experimental series, wasn't a risk? You think that Lost wasn't an experimental series? You don't think Smallville was a risque experimental series? Alias, Fringe, all the great shows, even going back, to other shows, right? That's what used to happen. The sci-fi series V in the 80s was a very experimental show. Even the Incredible Hulk television series, all experimental, all risky, but no risk, no reward. And unfortunately, all they want to do are prequels, sequels, and recreations. So now we're hearing that Tim Kring wants to reboot his hero show. He's already tried bringing it back once, and it's failed. This is insane. They are not interested in any originality, any experimentation. That's why Zack Snyder had to take his Rebel Moon idea to Netflix. And now the leadership of Netflix has changed. It's Dan Lin, who doesn't seem to have much respect for Zack Snyder. Now, I think, it's interesting because if you see the viewership of the first Rebel Moon, it was very good. But the reaction to, Rebel Moon was typical of the reaction Zack Snyder has. Some people liked it, some people hated it. It'll be interesting how people deem the sequel, how people deem both of these 6-hour cuts. 6-hour director's cuts is what we're getting for Rebel Moon. That's fucking insane, everyone. I'm not telling you I won't be sitting there spending 6 hours here and 6 hours there watching these cuts, because I will. I'm very, very excited about these director's cuts. I can't stop thinking about them. How I review a 6 hours director's cut of Rebel Moon, I have no idea. I'm not really about, I don't remember anything. Once I've seen something, it doesn't stick in my mind. I'd have to watch something 100 times to review it properly. My reviews are shit. But I'm very, very excited, not only to watch these things for my own enjoyment, but for the channel as well. I love Zack Snyder. I think he's a very interesting experimental guy. And in a lot of ways, he's everything that we lack today. You don't think that Star Wars was an experimental movie. You don't think a 1978 Superman movie was experimental. They'd never made a superhero, a big blockbuster, expensive superhero movie before. You don't think Lethal Weapon was experimental. There's so many things. Everything was experimental. And all they want to do now is take the experiments and reboot them and relaunch them every time. And the more they try and make a safe bet for the money, the more money they are going to lose. There's no imagination, there's no risk-taking, there's no daring do, there's no wonder, there's no imagination anymore. That's why I'm watching old movies. That's why I can't be bothered. I'm not going to watch the brand new Civil War movie with all its propaganda, with the director telling us that we should start trusting journalists because it's dangerous not to trust journalists. Fuck you, you extremist propaganda merchant. I'm fed up of all these activists in Hollywood today obsessed with Trump, obsessed with their activism, obsessed with their hatred for straight men. I hate you all. You're a bunch of twats. You are not the founding fathers, founding fathers of Hollywood, the pioneers, the people who invented Hollywood, the Keatons, the Buster Keatons, the Chaplins, the Laurel and Hardys, the Judy Garland, the guy who both directed Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind. By the same guy, he was directing The Wizard of Oz, and he went and saved Gone with the Wind. Wow. And these pioneers are gone. Of course, they've been gone for many, many decades now. But where are the new pioneers? We had Lucas, we had Francis Ford Coppola, we had so many great directors because they were bringing them in from film schools and they were bringing in new actors from, drama schools. No, they're not doing that. Do you remember the Disney Club? They were bringing in new talent and using them, right, and bringing them in. This is what I'm saying. If I was running a studio, this is what I would be doing. I would literally, on my lots, have a drama school, have a film school, bringing in this talent when the other talent was too old to keep going. There would be a conveyor belt of talent. I'm not saying I know everything about the studio and television system, but I know enough to say that the well has run dry and our excitement and our motivation for this industry as consumers is dead. It's gone. What have we got to look forward to? Because people, pioneers and experimental writer-directors like Zack Snyder, I know he's more of a director than a writer, are being heckled and laughed at for being experimental, for having some daring do, having some wonder, right? And being different. Snyder is mocked for being unique and different because we're not in the era for that. We're not in the era for new, young, vibrant filmmakers and actors. It's just the same people making the same old shit. You know, I'm talking about earlier, you know, the Marvel's director getting, you know, the 28 Days Later sequel, whatever it is, right? She was in a flop. She directed a terrible movie. I can't tell you if she's a good or bad director. I'm telling you, out of all the directors in Hollywood, why her? If you want another black woman, surely you can find a black woman who's actually a good director if that's what you want to do. But no, because you're just cherry picking from the same trough all the time and you're not willing to go outside of your system. Now, back in the days, in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s and beyond, there was so much talent, right? People were invited to Hollywood, you know, people from the stage, directors from the stage, artists from the stage, to be in films, and they will be signed up for studios like MGM. MGM was one of the great studios. It's now owned by a streaming service. If that doesn't disgust you, if you think MGM being owned by Amazon is a good fucking thing, you don't care and love this fucking industry. And that's the problem. This is where we are today. It's dead. It's over. Dead before it started. Finished before the creation of man. The industry that we come onto channels like this to discuss is fucking dead. And it was more alive when we were talking about the DCEU and fighting for the Snyder Cut, because at least the Snyder Cut was a unique original vision. And we don't have visionaries. Where are the visionaries? Right? I understand that Christopher Nolan is a really good director, but we need more than Nolan and Villeneuve, because I'm fed up of grounded realism. I want grounded realism, but I also want escapism, right? You look at Back to the Future. That's another film inspired by The Wizard of Oz. Instead of our Dorothy, we've got Marty McFly. You know, instead of a tornado, we've got a time machine. Instead of the Scarecrow and the Tin Man and the Cowardly Lion and the Witch and the Wizard, we've got a mad scientist called Doc Brown, who's those characters rolled into one. It literally is the Wizard of Oz. You know, so from great ideas, so instead of rebooting the Wizard of Oz, they created their own Wizard of Oz movie called Back to the Future. But and that was an experimental movie. That was a risky movie that must have been quite expensive to make, right? But they took the risk. As I say, no risk, no reward. And this is where we are today. And it's very sad if you're like me or you who are passionate about film, passionate about great stories, passionate about great television, passionate about great cinema, because we don't have it. The other day I saw a cinema owner or someone who owns a cinema company or whatever it is, right, saying you can't beat the feeling of going to watch a film and getting other people's reactions in the theatre. They don't get it. They don't understand. It's like a good shop. A great shop is successful, a store, because you've got the stock that people want. It's all about what you project onto the screen. And if you project onto the screen a piece of shit that people are falling asleep together to, there's no point. If you're willing to make great movies, great art, great content to project onto the screen, then your movie theatres wouldn't be closing down, wouldn't be going bankrupt. And that's the thing. You can't con people into coming to watch a movie in a movie theatre so they can sit there and react together to a piece of shit.